You're not blocked, you're not disconnected, and if they told you your energy is weak, they were wrong. The problem runs deeper, and it's more dangerous. Your frequency is powerful, but it's being used in a way that sabotages the very reality you're trying to create. And the harder you try to get it right, the further everything seems to slip away. In this video, you're going to see the invisible mistake almost no one notices, the exact point where energy turns into defense instead of creation, and why this detail completely changes how the universe responds to you. Stay until the end, because there's a hidden adjustment here that transforms everything. If this resonates with you, step into this space and subscribe. There's a specific kind of frustration that only conscious people feel. It's when you know too much to deceive yourself, but still don't understand why reality won't respond. You study spirituality, you understand energy, you talk about frequency, you recognize emotional patterns, and still something won't move. Life seems to hear you but not obey. And this creates a strange, almost silent sensation of being close to something great without ever touching it. Most people interpret this as blockage, delay, or spiritual testing. But that interpretation is too comfortable. The truth is more subtle, and for that very reason, harder to accept. Highly conscious people don't get stuck from lack of power. They get stuck because consciousness amplifies everything, including what's still misaligned within them. The higher the frequency, the greater the capacity for amplification. And when that amplification happens from a distorted internal point, the effect is invisible, yet constant. There's a dangerous illusion in the modern spiritual world, the idea that awakening automatically solves practical life. It doesn't. Awakening without internal alignment is like accelerating a vehicle without adjusting the steering wheel. The force increases, but the direction stays wrong. And the more force you apply, the faster you move away from the destination you think you're pursuing. The problem was never the potency of your energy. It was how it's being directed. That's why two people can apply exactly the same technique, repeat the same words, visualize the same scenes, and get opposite results. One prospers, the other burns out. One expands, the other enters internal conflict. Not because the universe picks favorites, but because frequency doesn't respond to what's consciously asked for. It responds to what's silently sustained. What you feel before you even formulate the desire is already shaping the response. Maybe now you're starting to notice something uncomfortable. Maybe you understand why, the more you try to make it work, the heavier everything feels. It's not that you're wrong for wanting more. It's that there's an invisible point where the wanting is born. And as long as that point isn't seen, the very force you possess keeps working against you, repeating patterns that seem external but never were. And this raises a question that completely changes the game. If your frequency is truly strong, what exactly is it strengthening right now? Because the answer to that isn't in the technique, not in thought, not in effort. And in the next section, you'll understand where this deviation begins to form. From very early on, almost all of us were taught to believe that frequency is a matter of thought. Think positive, visualize with clarity, repeat affirmations. Keep your mind focused on what you want. This narrative spread like absolute truth, simple to understand and easy to sell. And for a while, it even seems to work. Small results appear, coincidences happen, hope grows. But then something stalls, and no one explains why. What was never said is that these practices only act on the surface of the energetic field. They reorganize mental images, but rarely touch the real internal state of the practitioner. It's like painting a cracked wall without looking at the structure behind it. On the outside, everything seems aligned. On the inside, the tension keeps sustaining the same old pattern, and frequency, which is intelligent, responds to the foundation, not the veneer. Ancient traditions already knew this. In Hermeticism, in Taoism, in initiatic schools, they never spoke of asking without first speaking of state. Reality wasn't seen as something that reacts to mental commands, but as a mirror that reflects internal coherence. Thought, emotion, and identity needed to be aligned. When they weren't, any attempt at manifestation became an effort that drained energy instead of creating it. Over time, this knowledge was simplified, fragmented, and transformed into quick formulas. The promise became more attractive, but the foundation was lost, and that's how many people began using consciousness itself as a tool for internal self-policing. They watch their thoughts all the time, monitor emotions, try to correct what they feel. Without realizing it, they enter a constant state of spiritual tension, believing they're evolving when in reality they're contracting. This is the hidden point of the story. The same consciousness that should liberate begins to pressure. The same frequency that should expand begins to demand results. And silently, the energy starts operating from urgency, comparison, and fear of doing something wrong. None of this is said out loud. It all happens beneath the spiritual practice. And that's exactly where the deviation sets in. Maybe now you recognize something familiar. Maybe you realize it wasn't lack of dedication, nor study, nor intention. It was incomplete learning, transmitted without the most important adjustment. And this leads us to an inevitable revelation. If the problem isn't in the technique, where exactly is it forming inside you? The mistake was never in your intention. This is important to say clearly, because many people blame themselves in silence. They believe they're desiring wrong, thinking wrong, feeling wrong, but intention by itself doesn't create anything. It only points a direction. What truly shapes reality's response is the internal state from which that intention is born, and that state is almost never conscious. When a desire arises from urgency, it carries a hidden message. Something is missing right now. When it's born from fear of losing, it silently affirms that loss is already a living possibility. When it comes from the need to prove worth, it reinforces the identity of someone who still needs validation. The frequency even becomes strong in these moments, but strong in the direction of internal conflict, not creation. That's why so many people feel like they're doing everything right and still wearing themselves out. They're using energetic force to sustain states they don't want to experience. It's like trying to cross a river by pushing the water instead of aligning your body with the current. The effort increases, exhaustion appears, and the crossing never happens. The energy is being used. But as resistance, frequency doesn't judge, doesn't correct, doesn't compensate. It only amplifies what's active. If the emotional foundation is lack, reality responds with situations that reinforce that sensation. If the foundation is control, obstacles arise that demand even more control. If the foundation is tense effort, life returns heavy tasks. Not as punishment, but as vibrational coherence. This is the mechanism almost no one perceives. And here emerges the most delicate point of all. Many people aren't attracting what they desire. They're amplifying what hasn't been resolved yet. Manifestation at this level doesn't create the new. It reveals the unintegrated. And the greater the consciousness, the faster and more intense this process becomes. What seems like failure is, in truth, exposure. This changes everything. Because if the problem isn't in the desire, not in the technique, not in the force, then it can only be in one place, in the internal point from which all of this is being generated. And as long as that point isn't observed, adjusted, and reorganized, the frequency will remain powerful, but operating in the wrong mode. There's a silent moment before any desire. It happens before thought, before words, before visualization. It's a state, an internal climate, a diffuse sensation that's almost never observed because it seems too obvious. But that's exactly where frequency begins to operate, not in what you ask for, but in the internal place from which you ask. That's why, before affirming anything, there's a question that completely changes the game. What am I feeling while I desire this? Not what you think about the desire, not the story you tell, the base feeling, what's present even when you stop thinking. That state is the true instruction sent to reality. When that feeling is born from lack, the energy organizes as seeking. When born from control, it organizes as tension. When born from constant effort, it organizes as struggle. And none of these frequencies are wrong. They simply create experiences compatible with themselves. The problem begins when a person tries to correct the result without adjusting the origin. The fine-tuning doesn't require new techniques. It requires presence. It requires noticing the exact moment when you try to use frequency to escape something internal, instead of aligning with it. When you trade rush for presence, the body relaxes. When you trade the need to prove for internal recognition, breathing changes. And when you trade effort for coherence, energy finds direction on its own. This is where many get confused. They think aligning frequency means feeling something positive. It doesn't. It means feeling what's real, without resistance. Vibrational coherence is born when you stop using energy as a compensation tool and start using it as an expression of your true state. Reality responds immediately to this shift, even though externally it may still take time to reorganize. This is the point where manifestation stops being a request and becomes a reflection. Nothing is forced. Nothing is compulsively repeated. Frequency simply reorganizes because there's no more internal conflict sustaining the old pattern. And when this happens, something curious emerges. The sensation that you no longer need to fight to elevate anything. But this realization brings one final twist. Because if alignment happens when you stop fighting, then what does it really mean to raise your frequency? For a long time, the idea of raising frequency was associated with effort, more practice, more emotional control, more internal vigilance, as if energy needed to be pushed upward, maintained in an artificially elevated state. But this view hides a crucial detail. Frequency doesn't rise under pressure. It reorganizes when resistance disappears. The true leap doesn't happen when you try to be more positive, more spiritual, or more conscious. It happens when you realize you are using your own energy as a defense mechanism. Defense against the fear of not having, of not being enough, of not getting there. Frequency in that state was busy protecting you, not creating. When you stop fighting what you feel and start observing with presence, something dissolves. The body stops reacting. The mind decelerates. The energy that was being used to sustain tension becomes free, not because you did something extra, but because you stopped doing something against yourself. And this release completely changes the field around you. This is the point almost no one notices. Your energy was never weak. It was just compromised, directed toward keeping old internal structures functioning. When those structures no longer need to be defended, frequency naturally finds expansion. Not as an emotional peak, but as a stable state of coherence. And that's why some people seem to manifest with ease, not because they know more techniques, but because they're not at internal war. They don't ask to fill a void. They express from an integrated state. Reality responds not to their effort, but to the absence of conflict. This understanding turns everything inside out, because if frequency rises when you stop fighting, then maybe the real work was never about elevating anything. Maybe it was about disarming what was using your energy against you. And it's exactly from this point that the entire narrative can finally be revealed from the beginning. When you understand that your frequency was never weak, something shifts internally. The tension drops, the guilt disappears, and that constant sensation of doing something wrong begins to dissolve. You realize you didn't need to become another person, nor force a superior state. You just needed to stop using your own energy as a shield against what hadn't been integrated yet. From this understanding, your relationship with reality changes. You stop asking from lack and start moving from coherence. Your thoughts become clearer, your body more present, and energy begins to flow without resistance. Not because everything resolved externally, but because the internal point of origin was realigned. And reality always responds to this silent adjustment. Maybe now you can see your patterns through different eyes. The repetitions weren't punishments, they were signals. Life was showing you, insistently, where your frequency was being used to defend instead of create. When you understand this, every experience stops being an obstacle and becomes a mirror. And this is one of the greatest leaps in consciousness anyone can make. The final detail, which almost no one notices, is simple and powerful. You don't manifest what you desire. You manifest from who you're being in the moment you desire. Adjust that point, and everything else reorganizes naturally, without struggle, without exhaustion, without spiritual pressure. If this revelation made sense to you, like this video, write in the comments what resonated most, and subscribe to Manifest Now to continue this journey. Turn on notifications and move to the next video, because there are even deeper layers of this alignment waiting to be revealed. The universe isn't just watching you, it's responding to who you become.